wasn't that long of a time ago where I was working as a minimum wage security guard, standing on my feet for 12-hour shifts and barely getting paid anything. I'm someone who failed my A-levels, went to a mediocre university, had no connections, no money, and no clear path forward. And now I'm sitting here in Dubai. I've worked with some of the top crypto companies at Chainlink. I've been flown around the world to teach at top university institutions. I've raised millions of dollars for clients, and I've helped secure hundreds of millions of dollars in crypto infrastructure. And all of that came from one decision: learning one skill. So in this video, I'm going to break down my story, how I went from being completely lost in life to now building a life that back then I could have barely imagined. All the wins, all the failures, and all the moments that changed everything in my journey. And I'm going to tell you because I want you guys to understand something. This is not about me being special. I'm not smarter than you. I don't have any advantages that you don't have. If anything, I have fewer advantages than you have. But I want to show you guys what is possible when you decide to change your life and commit to learning a skill that actually matters. Because I grew up in an environment where growing up, I didn't have that much freedom, right? Because of the area and the demographic that I was raised in, you know, it meant that a lot of things I didn't get to experience. A lot of things that other kids got to do, I didn't really get to do. And when you're young and you see everyone else experiencing life in ways that you can't, it does make you feel like you're missing out. So in my head, I had this idea that university for me would be my chance to, you know, properly experience life. And I realized that once I got there, I did finally get to experience everything that I've been missing out on, like the freedom, the social life, all of that. But the reality of what actually happened is completely different. Because when I got to university, I realized that all the things that I thought that I wanted to do and all the things that I wanted to do when I was younger, at that new age, being in university, being an adult, I don't really want to do them things anymore. I'd kind of aged out of it, and that part of my life and that window had closed. And you see, when you don't have money, your options are limited. You either do degenerate stuff, or you play video games, or you just float about in life. And I'm not gonna lie, I did some of that for a while, you know, but eventually you realize that it just leads to an empty life. It doesn't lead you anywhere. So I spent about a year at university basically just wasting my time, not really doing anything, not building anything. I was just purely existing. And then I hit 19 and I had a kind of a moment of clarity, you know, because I realized everything's basically dead, right? I'm not doing anything. And if I keep going down this path, I wasn't gonna end up anywhere. And that for me was my wake-up call. So when you're in that kind of situation, you realize your options are still limited, right? Most people's first thought when they think about improving their life is they think, I need to make more money. But that isn't actually the most realistic first option for a lot of people in that scenario, right? Because making money is more than just, you know, it's not just a physical thing. You know, making more money is a mental thing. It's a spiritual thing, some would even say, right? So there's multiple factors that determine your ability to make money. And especially when you don't understand how the world works and when you've never really been exposed to anything beyond just getting a job and trading your time for minimum wage, you don't really have a clear idea on where to actually start. So I didn't know nothing about any side hustle. I didn't know nothing about drop shipping or online business. And I didn't know nothing really about any sort of side hustles. And on top of that, I didn't even have, you know, liquid cash to be investing in anything. So at that time, I realized that the only thing I could control and the thing that I needed to control first was just myself. So I started with my personal development. And for me at that time, it was just going to the gym, right? And, you know, it might sound basic, but it was basically the only thing that I had control of and that I felt like I could do. You know, you can't just magically make money appear, but what you can do is get up and force yourself to build some discipline. Get up and force yourself to go to the gym, improve yourself physically. So that's what I did. I started training consistently, and when you do that, you start feeling better, you start building up some discipline, and then that kind of gives you the confidence and builds up the momentum to then start thinking about how you can translate that new discipline and discipline that you built up for yourself, and you can translate that into other areas of your life. The next kind of phase that I thought about was networking. It made me want to go out more. So naturally, that's what I started doing. I started putting myself out there, going to events, talking to people, and just figuring life out. And through that, I naturally started meeting people who were doing interesting things. But of course, I still needed to make money. And the only path that I could see to actually make money was learning a skill, because I still didn't have that much money. And you see, when you learn a skill, you don't necessarily need money up front to start. You just need to be able to trade your time. So that's essentially what I did. So I taught myself how to build websites, and I was terrible at it. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not even exaggerating. My websites were awful. Even till now, I'm not really that good at making websites. I was on Fiverr, I was doing gigs for like £50, maybe sometimes £100 if I was lucky, maybe even £200 here and there. And it was stressful, the pay was terrible, the clients were giving me headache, but it was something that I didn't have before, which was leverage. So now I had a skill and something that I could offer, and that gave me something to open more conversations. I could meet people and tell people that I build websites, and that would, spark interest in some people, open up new conversations for me, and it just expanded my network and my world. And it also gave me some credibility that I didn't have before. And it gave people a reason to interact with me, and a reason to talk to people who were doing things that I didn't have before, right? So through those conversations, I was able to meet more and more people, and during that time, I ended up meeting some people who were into crypto at the time, and they were getting involved in project launches, doing small things, and part of what they needed was websites. So I made the website. That's how I kind of got my first taste into what crypto even was. Before I even knew about anything on the back end, I was building websites for crypto projects. And yeah, that was my first introduction to crypto. Not really a crypto developer, not doing anything smart contract wise, but just, simply making their websites. But what that was for me was an entrance into a new room, right? I was around people who were going deeper into different industries, and it gave me an expanded perspective on, where I can leverage my skills. The good thing is that as I naturally aligned with these people, they wanted to get more technical, and so did I. So we took the initiative to understand more about the blockchain, and we decided to, go deeper, and we ended up doing it together. And this is the first decision I'd say in my journey that really changed everything for me. So now we're learning crypto, building projects, understanding more about how crypto technically works. And after a few months, I actually ended up landing my first crypto client. There's a client that I got to build a full stack crypto app, so that's including smart contracts and integrating that to the website. And I remember I got paid about £500 for it. Now you might think that £500 doesn't sound like a lot, it's not, but what you have to understand is at that time, and from my perspective at that time, that I made that £500 sitting in my bed in my university room just typing on my computer. Whereas at the time I was working as a security guard doing 12-hour shifts. To even make £500, that would have required me doing several 12-hour shifts across the course of a month. And now I've just made that same money sat from my bed in a matter of a few days. That was the first biggest mindset shift that I had, because for the first time, I'm now realizing that there's another way to make money without physically trading your time, physically having to be somewhere, physically having to grind for hours through mundane labor. I could now just, provide value in the market and get paid for it. And I remember that feeling. It was like a whole new door opened in my mind. It was like a whole new chapter that I'd unlocked, It felt like my video game character just got leveled up. And then the funny thing is, the very next day I had a security guard shift again. So during this time I was at the Euros, and I used to work security at football stadiums. And the way it usually worked is I used to stand in the crowds, and I used to basically just get to watch the matches, right? That was what my job was. It was easy. And I remember this particular day, right, the day after I just got paid £500 for building this crypto app, the very next day England were playing, and me, I'm an Arsenal fan, so I was watching these matches. I was tuned into Bukayo Saka. I wanted to watch Bukayo Saka. I wanted to watch him play. And I remember arriving to the shift this day, and for some reason, this particular shift, they told me that I was working at the turnstiles. So what that means is, when you work at the turnstiles, you're just scanning tickets, and you stay at the turnstiles throughout the whole duration, and you scan people in, let people out. And what that meant for me is that I wouldn't have actually been able to watch the match at all. And it's funny because I'd never been put at turnstiles before working security. I always got to watch the matches. And today, for some reason, just happened to be the day after I made that £500 from my bed. Now they're putting me somewhere where I didn't want to be. And I don't know what happened, you know, something came over me in this moment, but I just decided, I was like, no, like, I don't want to do this. I was thinking about, why am I here? I just thought to myself, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And I literally said to them, like, at first I just said, no, like, I'm not doing turnstiles, that put me in my usual position. And they refused. And I remember I just looked there, I was like, hold on a minute, am I really about to do this? About to stand here for another 12 hours, waste a whole nother day when I could be learning more about smart contracts and trying to find a new client? And something just came over me and I said, you know what? Fuck this, I'm going home. And I quit on the spot. I didn't even have a guarantee that I was gonna have more clients. That was my first client, right? And I literally just walked away from my only stable income. But because something in my mind had shifted and my whole perspective of life had been changed, the £500 that I got from sitting in my bed in my uni room just showed me what was possible on the other side. And it made me feel like I couldn't go back to doing this security job. Definitely not standing at turnstiles. Definitely not being told that I can and can't do something, you know. I just made £500 completely permission free compared to doing how many security guard shifts being told what to do. So that day I literally left the shift, went back home and told myself that I'm gonna make this crypto thing work with no backup plan. And here's the part that most people won't really tell you in their journey, right? Because after I did that, after I quit, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't get another client for quite a while, for a whole nother month to be exact. A whole month of me just not getting any money. This time I'm still grinding every day, I'm learning, I'm building, I'm outreaching, trying to get more clients, trying to find more work. Didn't get nothing. And I remember sitting there for a few weeks thinking to myself, like, what the fuck have I just done? Like, should I go back? Should I eat the humble pie and just go back? Should I try and get another job? Have I just ruined my life? Did I just throw away my only income for nothing? It was a very, very hard month. It was peak. The doubt was crazy. And I was just questioning myself, like, every day, like, have I made a mistake? But at the same time, I just kept pushing because I was like, I'm committed to this path. Like, what else do I want to do? I'd seen the light. I was holding on to just that £500. That's all the hope that I had, that I got. That first £500 that I got, you know, fully remote, working on my own time. I held on to that. Like, just something I'd call magical happened, right? Something crazy happened. My ex at the time, one day came to me randomly. She'd come back from work and she told me that her friend at work, she was speaking with her friend at work, and her friend's boyfriend at the time was launching a crypto project and they needed a developer. Like, think about that, guys. Like, what's the chances? I'm here struggling, you know, doing everything I can to try and find a new client, and one day my ex just tells me that someone at her work, you know, someone at her work's boyfriend is launching a crypto project and need a developer, they're willing to pay. And I always say this saying, right? This saying that always sticks with me, right? Which is that luck, because that situation was luck, right? But actually luck is preparation mean opportunity. You have to be ready for the moment an opportunity shows up. If I hadn't spent all that time grinding, learning, getting better, making sure that I was ready, when that opportunity came, I would have fumbled it. I wouldn't have been ready to take on that client. But on the contrary, because I was doing all that grinding, I was fully ready. And I got the intro, and I was able to close that client, and that became my next client. And then I delivered for that client, got another payout. And that kind of reignited that dream that I had in my head, that £500 that I'd attached. This time it was £1,250, you know, for just a few weeks of work. And then a few weeks later, I saw someone that I followed on Twitter, an entrepreneur at the time that I was following on Twitter, and they made a Twitter post saying that they were looking for a crypto developer. So I sent him a DM And guess what? That became my next client. And the crazy thing is, guys, that DM that I sent is the only piece of outreach till today that I've ever done to get a client. Till today. That's the only piece of outreach that I've ever done in my whole business. Of the multiple hundreds of thousands of pounds that I've made, that is the only piece of outreach I've ever done till today. Ever since then, every single one of my work has come from referrals. And now, guys, once you have a few clients, things start to compound, right? Because now I'm continuing to network, continuing to go to events, getting invited to even talk at events, you know, talking about what I'm building and what I'm doing in crypto. And it made me realize something, because at the time, there was no other young people doing what I was doing in crypto. There weren't other young people building in crypto, especially on the technical side. It was completely rare. So when I was showing up in these rooms and talking about what I was doing, I was an anomaly. People were listening to me. I had authority in these rooms. You know, I had something to offer in these rooms that other people didn't have. I was a niche. I was my own niche. And as I was even getting invited to do more talks, I was getting more authority from it. And that just led to me getting more clients. And this just led to me getting more and more opportunities. And less than a year later from quitting my security job, my life had changed so much. I was now flying internationally on my own for the first time. I went Ethereum Barcelona 2022. And for me, that was such a big deal, guys, because it's not just the event, but it's the fact that I had the money to travel to another country, fully self-funded by myself. It's the fact that I was going there for work, not just for holiday. You know, my work that I was doing was taking me international. It's the fact that my life had changed so much in less than a year just of learning this one skill. So I went to Barcelona by myself, first time traveling solo, first time in that kind of environment, meeting people, getting more clients, expanding my network, and that just fueled me to keep building. And I remember I came back, went back to university, and I decided, let me keep the momentum going. So I started my own crypto community. Bear in mind, at this time in university, I wasn't even going to lectures and stuff like that. I wasn't attending classes. I was just using the facilities to do my work and take my client calls, literally. But what I was also doing is I was running my community and I was teaching people. I was also showing them what I was doing, showing them about crypto development. Even though I was still new to the industry, I was trying to put people on, showing them what I was building, who I was working with. And that community actually grew. It ended up being one of the biggest crypto developer communities in a university in the UK. And because of that, I got noticed. I got in touch with the community manager of Chainlink UK, and that was my introduction and my bring-in to working for Chainlink. So now I'm working for Chainlink, one of the biggest names in the crypto space. Me, the guy who failed my A-levels, the guy who got kicked out of school twice. Me, now I'm working for one of the biggest crypto companies. See how my life's changed, guys, in a year. That's crazy, all of learning one skill. Now I've started my initiatives with Chainlink. And a few months later, I get a knock on the door. The head of computer science at Imperial is inviting me to run a crypto developer bootcamp. And if you guys don't know, Imperial College London is one of the top universities in the world, not just the UK, but the world, guys. Me, someone who went to a mediocre university, had terrible grades, everyone was way smarter than me, and now I'm getting invited to teach and run a blockchain workshop at Imperial, guys. That's crazy. So I got introduced to the head of computer science there. He runs the entire curriculum, and he personally invited me to teach. I failed my A-levels. I got C, D, and a U. My grades were nothing. My grades were nowhere near what was required to even get into Imperial. There's no way I could have gotten there as a student. But now I'm getting invited to teach there. So I remember the day, the first one, I stood there in front of 500 people, Imperial students, senior engineers, people from all backgrounds and ages, all of them just looking at me, listening to me, asking me questions. Me, just a 21-year-old. I remember standing there looking at the crowd, and I had this realization that every single person in the room is technically more accomplished than me. They got better grades, better university, more experience, more credentials, and they're all there to learn from me. Your credentials don't matter as much as people think. What matters is what you can do, what you know, and what you've built. And I had something that they didn't, and they all recognized it in the room. That one boot camp led to so much more. Solana flew me out to Istanbul just a few months later. And that made me fall in love with the city so much I ended up moving there for almost a year. Later that same year, Abu Dhabi University invited me to teach their students, all expenses paid. I remember landing, this was my first time in the UAE, I was so exhausted. I'd rented a Range Rover and I was driving from Dubai to Abu Dhabi, super tired, my first time in the Middle East, teaching Abu Dhabi University students, over 500 of them. I then went back to Dubai and experienced the city, well, crazy city, my first visit. And that made me think, I want to move to Dubai. Less than a few months later, I then moved to Dubai. And now 2 years later, I'm still here. So I've told you the wins. Now let me tell you some of the things that I haven't said yet, right? Because for every win that I just described, I promise you I had at least 5, maybe 10 losses along that journey. Because it's easy for people to tell a story like this and think that everything was just a straight line up, like the trajectory was just the upwards direction, but it wasn't. It was actually like pure chaos, failure after failure after failure after failure. Let me give you a specific example. Just before I went to Barcelona, I had 2 clients that I got paid about 6k GBP in total. One was about 4k, the other one was about 2k. That was like the first real money I had at the time. I remember the first payment came in on BNB chain, and me stupidly I sent it to the wrong wallet on another chain, so all that money was just gone. Literally like a few days later, the other payment, I accidentally committed my private keys to GitHub and then my wallet got drained. So all of that money, that whole entire 6k just gone, just like that, just before I'm about to fly out to another country. If I even go into the number of opportunities that I missed out on, the number of rejections that I faced, the number of clients that I lost, the amount of things that didn't work out, the amount of paths that I explored that just ended up going nowhere. Guys, do you know how long I spent grinding audits before I even got my first payout? My first audit payout was even only £300. Do you know how long it took me to even get my first payout doing auditing? How many months just sitting there every single day, day after day, how many black coffees that I had, just learning, practicing, submitting findings, getting nothing back. Most people in my situation would have quit way earlier than I did. I didn't even quit, but most people would have, in my position, would have quit. And beyond the money, it was just think about it personally, like isolating yourself deliberately to commit yourself to one goal. I stopped going to university properly, wasn't socializing the way everyone else socialized in university, just showing up, using the computers, not going and trying to meet friends, not doing all these other things that people do at university, just me working, grinding, learning every single day. And there were days where, of course, I'm questioning everything that I'm doing. I'm questioning, like, am I going down the wrong path? Am I wasting my life? You know? But I just kept going, like, you know, when you just commit yourself to one goal, all you can really think about is just keep going and keep going and keep going. And for me, one of the things that made the biggest difference is the fact that I wasn't doing it alone. I went through it with one of my closest friends, and you know, when you're building something together, you're learning together and you're pushing each other. So even when one person's down, the other person's there to push you forward and vice versa. And you have that accountability. So the reason why I'm telling you all of this is so that you guys can understand. It's not about the numbers that I've made. It's about the point where I came from to the point where I am now. And it all started just off one skill. I learned the skill to become a crypto developer. I learned that one skill, and every other thing that I've been able to do so far in my life has followed just from that. The clients, the consulting, the agency, the teaching, the opportunities, the traveling, the life that I'm living right now. You see the Burj Khalifa in the background. And that is why I teach this skill now. That is why I built the Central Hub, and that is why I make these videos, because I want to inspire people. I want to show people what this skill did for me and what it can do for other people. I came from an environment where statistically, I shouldn't even be doing any of this. I failed my A-levels. I got kicked out of secondary school. In secondary school, just to do my GCSEs, I had to do it in isolation because I was that kind of student. Then I got to A-levels and I was in isolation almost every single week. I then had to do my A-levels in isolation. I wasn't allowed to come to my school for the last 6 months before A-levels. I wasn't allowed in my school in sixth form. I went to a mediocre university in West London. No connection, no money, no advantages. And now I'm sitting here in Dubai, living here for the last 2 years, having worked for some of the biggest companies in crypto to my name. I've been flown around the world to teach at top universities. I just got back from New York to go chat to my clients in New York. If I've been able to do this, you guys can do this. If I decided to change my life and I committed to learning a skill that allowed me to change my life and I didn't quit when things got hard, then that means you guys can do the exact same thing. That's it, guys. It's that simple. So if you're watching this and you're in a similar position, you're thinking you want to change your life, maybe you can relate to the story and you feel like you were in a similar place to where I was, feeling lost, feeling like you're behind, feeling like you don't have a clear path forward. I want you guys to hear this. It's possible. It's possible. You don't need to have the right background, the perfect background. You don't need to have gone to the right school. You don't need to have the connections or the money to start. All of these things that society's instilled in your brain that tells you that this is the blueprint to becoming successful, don't buy into any of that. If you want help with that, you want a structured path, guidance, feedback, and a community of people on the same journey, that is what the Central Hub is for. I share with you guys stories like Jacob, who landed a role at Ethereum at 22 years old. I share with you stories like Corriday, who hasn't even finished university and is now working for Binance. They followed the pathway, they followed the blueprint, and they believed it was possible, and now look at the results that they have. Make that decision to change your life, commit to it, keep learning, never stop learning, and never ever ever quit.